Welcome to Hobart Workshop. Would like to advise all present that there is an audio recording that is being made of this meeting. All persons that are attending the meeting today are asked to be respectful, considerate towards other people attending the meeting. Welcome, Lord Mayor. Language and conduct at this meeting that could be perceived as offensive, defamatory or threatening to a person attending the meeting or listening to the recording is not acceptable. For the purposes of the recording, elected members should wait for myself to announce them before speaking, and if everyone can have their mobile phones turned off or put to silent, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Welcoming councillors that are attending: Councillor Harvey, Councillor Kidsos, Alderman Noyes Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, the Lord Mayor and myself. And there are apologies from Alderman Zuko, and I'd note that the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Sherlock, is on leave, as is Councillor Dutta. Now, I'd like to share with you this afternoon the Welcome to Country that occurs at my son's primary school for something different. And it's a wonderful example of how we can include Indigenous Aboriginal Palawa culture into our everyday lives, with not just informal settings like at a meeting today or at council meetings when the Lord Mayor does it, but we can include their culture even from at the age of 5. So they share their country and welcome to country with hello earth, hello sky, hello friends, hello I. We thank the Palawa from now and before who cared for the lands from mountain to shore. Together we will discover and grow and care for country wherever we go. And I think it's just a beautiful little summary of how we can incorporate Palawa culture and their care for land into our everyday lives. Moving on to confirmation of minutes. Can I have an elected member move the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Consideration of supplementary items. There are none. Indications of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest for elected members? There is not. Item 5, transfer of agenda items. Does anyone have any transfer of items at all? No. Moving on, thank you, elected members. We'll move into officer reports, of which I think there are 2. So item 6.1, lease renewal for the Lost Freight Cafe up at the Springs. Moved by the Lord Mayor. Any questions or debates on the item? Councillor Kelly.
To the appropriate officer, who's that?
I was going to get away with no questions.
I'm just surprised there's no CPI increase or annual increase on that.
No, there is. It's dot point 3. Index per annum annually in line with Hobart CPI.
Oh, good, because the other story not doing that. The and there was no valuation sort on that, was
yes, there was. That
from a valuer
yes, Acumenitus, which came in at, I believe, 6,760. That's right. The rental value.
Yeah, right. And that included the seating area all around and all that?
That's the lease footprint in its entirety, yes.
Right, okay. And so what's that, the Wi-Fi story with that? They tap into our Wi-Fi or we tap into theirs?
So it's a bit of both. So my understanding is we provide the infrastructure for the Wi-Fi, which they also use, but it also provides public access Wi-Fi for the greater area around the Springs, which obviously has a public benefit.
Okay. When was that lease signed again? Was that
the first lease?
Yeah.
A bit over 5 years ago, I would say, Councillor Kelly, because we only do a 5-year term, so it would be roughly 5 years since you've been.
Yeah. Right. No, that's great. All right, thanks for that.
Just a question. So we always only ever do 5. We never do 5x5s.
We can have options, but we have some constraints under the Local Government Act around Section 177 and 178, where if you're creating an interest over the 5 years, you have to do public consultation. So, given this, that it is actually a temporary structure as opposed to bricks and mortar, we felt that it was appropriate to go again at 5 years based on what we had the first time around, because the mountable structure.
Just a further question to that. So, in terms of liaising with the leaseholders, did they say, look, if you could give us 5 by 5, we might, add to the seating area or put in solar panels or whatever?
So my officers and I went and met with them on site, and they had a few issues that they wanted to, learnings, if you will, from the first 5 years that they wanted folded into the second lease. One of those was around the outside dining area and how that interrelates with the bollards and the parking. So we were able to work through that, and it's reflected in the document. Ultimately, they were comfortable with where we've got to with the proposed term.
Councillor Kerr?
Just one comment too. Bearing in mind the whole state of the mountain in review, it's probably not a good idea to give some extraordinary long lease on that, and no doubt there's going to be some movement. It might not be in 5 years, but I reckon it's going to be in the 10. Something is there, yeah.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, more of a comment than a question, yeah. All right, thanks for that.
One from me, if you don't mind. Mr. Young, can we be provided, if you can't do it today, just with an update on the power connection to Lost Freight, and any, I guess, as part of that, any potential implications that might have on a future lease there? So if we were to spend the $60,000 or $100,000, however much it is, to connect power from the old hotel site down to Lost Freight and relieve them if they need to have a generator, perhaps the rental might be higher, but it's still a few years down the track. But if we can have some more information.
Absolutely. So if I understand correctly, working backwards, we have they use a generator at the moment. They're not, and the value is reports reflective of that. If there was some higher level of amenity, the value would logically go up for the rental. But we haven't done that work, obviously, because they haven't connected.
Yeah, that's right. It's more of a side question to the lease in front of us, just to understand, because there was a conversation and an early EM request from me 3 years ago that said it was to be connected soon, and it's just doesn't seem.
I'm happy to take an action
anyway.
to run that down and see
Wonderful.
where it got to.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Anything further on this item? All right, it's moved by the Lord Mayor. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Young. Moving on to 6.2, procurement quotation exemption report. Is there any questions, comments, queries, and can I have an elected member move it?
Go on.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. So that's moved by Councillor Harvey. I'll just give you a second to refresh your memories in case something does pop up.
Not for me.
Happy?
Not for us.
Very good. Thank you, councillors. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. All right. So we're moving into the workshop content now, and just a reminder that this is not a decision-making forum, but the first item is 7.1, briefing from Taswater. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming today. Joining us at the table, we have Dom Hughes, Stakeholder Relations Lead, Christian Atfield, Stakeholder Relations Manager, and Matt Balfe, GM of Customer and Community. Thanks for coming up. And I would note to elected members as well that this has come about because of Councillor Lohberger's keen interest in water and how it's managed in the city. So thanks to Councillor Lohberger for his work to get you guys here today. I'll hand over to you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having us along this afternoon. We've already done the invitations, which is saving that work. But yeah, I'm Dom, for those who don't know me. This is Matt Balfe on my right and Christian up the end. So we just want to run you through our price and service plan 5. We've got a few slides that explain the current state of our network, how this has shaped that plan and what it means for different customer groups. And after that, we'll talk about our next steps and take some questions. And so just to be clear up front, this is a proposal. We've put forward a plan for the 4 years starting 1 July 2026. It reflects what we've heard from our regulators and customers about what matters most to them. We believe this plan strikes a balance between competing priorities. We know we can't do everything at once, but we also can't ignore the fact that parts of our network are under pressure and they need significant investment. So our 5th price and service plan outlines how we'll continue much needed investment from July next year. We understand that price increases are a concern, and that's why we've spent a lot of time and work thinking this through. we believe that early investment is the smarter option. It's the more cost-effective approach. But first, I want to run us through some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment at Tas Water. Even with the progress that we've made, and we have made a lot of progress in the 12 or 13 years that we've been going, I think there's still some big issues that we're facing. 91% of our sewage treatment plants aren't fully compliant with EPA guidelines. We're seeing 64 sewer main breaks and 43 water main bursts for every 100 kilometres of pipe that we've got. That's double the national median. Water loss, while it's improved from about 30% down to 23%, it's still the highest in the country, and we're aiming to drive that down to about 14%. Some areas in Tasmania just don't have the capacity that they need to support projected housing and business growth. A number of our dams need work to make sure they meet dam safety regulator requirements. And looking ahead, there's other risks in the future that we need to plan for. Technology upgrades, we've got costs that are rising across the board, we've got a change in climate that means rainfall's less predictable, and we need to make sure we've got the right infrastructure in place to handle that challenge. And we're also facing cybersecurity threats that we need to be across, and we have regulatory requirements about that as well. So our challenge is to invest in a way that tackles these issues while keeping prices affordable. So I've got this slide quite early in the pack because it's important for us. We've made a significant commitment to the community on this. We understand that we're proposing a higher price increase than we have in recent years, and that's going to worry some of our customers, and we need to be ready to support them as much as possible to work through their bills. So that's why we're proposing an additional $2.4 million investment in our Tas Water Assist program. This is a really good program. While our customers are in it, they get issued with a dedicated case manager. All the sort of overdue fees and interest and debt collection stuff goes away while we just work through them to try and get them back on top of their bills. It gives them the breathing room that they need so that they can get back on their feet. We're also proposing tailored advice to help customers manage their bills, connections to organisations that can help put them in touch with water efficient appliances. You'd be amazed at the difference that just having a low flow shower head can make to your water bill. Referring them to financial counsellors and matching bill payments for customers in hardship who are actively working to pay off their debt. But whatever the final price determination we get back from the regulator, we're 100% committed to making sure that our customers who are struggling with the cost of living have all the support that they need. It's been a long process just to get to this point. There's been a hell of a lot of work on engaging with the community and Tasmanians from right across the spectrum. We had 3,500 survey responses, 8,000 interactions, and the reach of this campaign was, I think, about over 200,000 people online. Offline, we engaged with people through community events, school visits and workshops, and then we had a 45-member community advisory panel that again came from people from all walks of life across Tasmania, different socio-economic groups. They met over 6 days. They heard from Tas Water's experts, and they produced an independent report that's now with the regulator as available on our website that outlines some of the things that they wanted to see. And what we heard firmly from them was they wanted more control of their bills. They wanted to see us tackle this work that's needed to improve environmental outcomes in Tasmania. This level of engagement, it's unprecedented. We've never done anything like this before, and other utilities are taking note of this. And it's why we believe that the PSP5 proposal strikes that right balance between what we need to do and the money to pay for it. So you're not going to be able to make out the fine print on this, but I'll just get you to concentrate on the colours. So as a regulated entity, the priorities in our price and service plans are guided strongly by the EPA, the Department of Health, and NRE TAS for dam safety. And these two tables show some of the proposed investment in PSP5. Water's on the left, sewer's on the right. And they also sort of highlight what targeted investment can achieve and what drives our investment decision. So in our first decade, Tas Water focused mostly on improving drinking water. There were 28 towns across Tasmania that had boil water alerts when we first came into being. A lot of those greens were red back then. So thanks to significant investment, those alerts are now gone. So our focus is shifting to the right to sewage under PSP5, and that's going to be our main focus through PSP5 and PSP6, the next plan after that one. So the red areas in the sewer table show high-risk sites. We need to reduce our impact on rivers, streams and other waterways. And while EPA compliance is essential, it's not the only driver. There's community expectations that are evolving in this space We're looking at things like cogeneration and reuse options, operational efficiency improvements, and most important of all, rationalisation. We've just got too many sewage treatment plants. We've got a lot of small, scattered, inefficient old sewage treatment plants across Tasmania, and we've got to get that number down and rationalise them to more modern plants and a network that makes sense for the future. So our goal is pretty simple. It's turning the reds into green.
I might just add to that.
Yep.
Yeah, while we're there, Dom. You'll notice that the reds extend past PSP 5, which is the period we're talking about, the next 4 years, in some of those instances. So even with the investment that we're proposing and the price increases we're proposing, it's not going to solve all of these problems. It's not a silver bullet, and it is a multi-price path issue.
So this is how we summarise PSP 5. This slide on the screen shows what our proposed investment will deliver across Tasmania. One of the big wins is reducing water loss. It's around 22.5% now. We're aiming to get that down to 14.4%. Just a couple of years ago it was 30%, so we know we can get there if the work's fully funded. We're planning a major lift in water main renewals, but also upgrades to the connected hardware, so that's meters, electricals and SCADA, which is our monitoring system. We need to better secure the network against water shortages, and that means dam safety upgrades, improving plant efficiency and fixing leaks. And it also means water conservation. So we're aiming to reduce water restrictions, cut water main breaks from 42 for every 100 kilometres of pipe down to 16, and cut sewer main breaks from 63 for every 100 kilometres of pipe down to 20. In doing that, we'll also improve the health of our waterways, reduce emissions, and increase the volume of water that we recycle. And importantly, we'll provide direct support for customers, giving them greater control over their bills. So this is looking at some of the major projects that we'll be aiming to deliver under PSP 5, under the proposal. We've got 150 projects, roughly speaking, that we're looking to do, with investment spread right across the state. It's important to note again that this is a proposal. If the regulator approves a lower price rise, that's going to have an impact on how many of these projects that we're actually able to deliver. So we'll prioritise projects that address the most immediate environmental, health and safety risks, guided by the regulators. That's the EPA, Department of Health and NRE TAS for the dams. But we also know the economic benefits of this investment. So our $1.7 billion capital plan will create more than 15,000 Tasmanian jobs and deliver $5 billion in economic benefit. The majority of this work should go to the local market. Right now, about 80% of our contracts are awarded to Tasmanian companies, and the work's spread across all regions. So
And that's by value.
By value. So the economic impact is generally statewide, and it's big. One that will interest the council and would have interest Ben, I'm sorry he's not here tonight, but I'll have a chat with him offline later, is our Ridgeway Dam upgrade. This is one of the biggest projects we're proposing to fund through PSP 5. This historic dam was built between 1911 and 1918. It needs work to improve its safety and ensure it can continue to operate at full capacity as a valuable part of the Greater Hobart water supply network. We've looked at a whole range of options for what to do with Ridgeway. It's taken longer than we thought because it is a complex project. It's been an assessment that's gone through three key criteria. One is technical, looking at basically what we can do in dam safety. There's the community and social considerations, and then environmental considerations as well. We've actually got some geotechnical investigative work coming up probably later this year that's going to help us nail down what we think the best option might be going forward for it. Now, I know there's a lot of interest in that. I'd be happy to come back with the project team and talk in a bit more detail about Ridgeway Dam, especially once we get closer to knowing exactly what the preferred option is there. And we can go through that with the guys who really know what they're talking about, the engineers. So what does the price change look like? The headline here is the proposed 8.8% price increase each year over the 4 years of PSP 5, but it's important to look beyond that headline. In year one, 33% of customers should see a price drop, and 23% of residential customers, mostly pensioners and people living alone, should save about $53. That's because we're proposing a tariff reform starting 1 July 2026, where the fixed charges component of your bill will go down and the usage charges will go up. It's a cost-neutral change for Tas Water, but it creates a fairer billing structure that reflects actual water use. So right now, 84% of your water bill is fixed.
It's a revenue neutral outcome.
Revenue neutral for Taswater, yep. We're proposing to reduce that to 67%, meaning customers will have control over a third of their bill. This change will also apply to sewer charges, which will include a variable component for the first time. As a result, fixed charges for all customers will drop by $176 in the first year. So lower water users will pay less and high water users will pay more, which is what customers have told us that they want, a fairer system that reflects the usage they actually have with their water. And this is a reform that we think will also encourage water conservation and give customers greater control over their bills. For non-residential customers, the same tariff changes we propose for residential customers will also apply. There's a couple of other important changes to highlight. We're proposing to remove the equivalent tenement system. Instead, sewer charges will be based on actual water usage, which better reflects the real loads that a business places on the network. This change means 63% of non-residential customers will be better off in year one. We're also proposing updates to how we charge our 4,000 commercial trade waste customers. That's including restaurants, cafes, pubs, car washes, beauty salons and workshops. This will be a fairer, more cost-reflective system, and 64% of these customers will be better off in year one. It also gives business a real opportunity to lower costs by using less water. We know that's not possible for every business, so we'll be looking at alternate water suppliers and working with those customers who might want to downsize their connections, and the same will apply to councils as well, not just businesses. We've already had some contact, I think, with Hobart Council staff on that, and we'll continue to do so through this process. This slide shows you how the bill changes will affect different customer groups. As you can see from the top two rows, most of our customers fall into the lower water usage categories. The largest group, people living alone, they'll typically see a reduction of around $53 in the first year, and then that price begins to creep up again as the subsequent price increases over the 4 years kick in. At the other end, the median household is shown at the bottom. For half of all households, the maximum increase in the first year will be $35. Another one that's worth looking at is tenants, since water usage charges are often passed on to landlords. While the shift in our fixed and variable pricing structure results in a noticeable percentage increase, the actual dollar impact is relatively modest. And for higher water users in the table, for example, larger families, it comes out to about less than $5 a week over the 4 years of the PSP5. And for someone living alone, it's obviously even less than that. So what's up next in the PSP5 process? Over the next 6 months, in fact, this process has already started, the economic regulator will go through our submission with a fine-tooth comb to make sure everything stacks up, both in terms of being sensible and good value. Then in February, we'll see a draft decision, and the regulator will open up a 6-week consultation so that people can have their say. The final decision will land around early May, and the new pricing will kick in from the 1st of July next year. In the meantime, we'll be out and about across Tasmania continuing to listen, just as we have right through this process. For councils, we know it's not easy to speak up in favour of price increases at any time, especially in the current climate. We are asking our council owners to consider backing the improved services that our customers expect and the investment that we need to protect the environment and future-proof our infrastructure. So a supportive letter to the regulator would be something that would be useful, and I'll be in touch about that in the future. And then when the final determination comes out in early 2026, a more detailed council submission could be a possibility then. And once more, just to make that point, it is a proposal that the regulator is looking at. None of this is locked in stone as yet. And last slide, questions. I think this is the first time I've done this where I haven't had the questions as I go through. People have actually waited to the end, so well done.
We're getting better at it. Yeah, that's right. Any elected members have any questions or comments, queries they'd like to make? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Who are your biggest customers with water? Which sectors or which industries?
From a high water usage, you're looking at those high industrial customers who are dotted around the state. So,
who are they?
That information would be commercially sensitive, so I probably wouldn't list them all, but if you can imagine the bigger the size of the company, if you're looking at industrial food processors, minerals processors, large companies like that. So they're the largest water users. And then you get into it dips away pretty quickly, and then you're looking at, you would consider the Department of Education as being a high water user, Homesteads may be a high water user, collectively, because of their properties, and then it starts to drop away, and then you're looking into irrigators, so vineyards, those sorts of areas. So people that are
Golf
using
courses?
sorry.
Golf courses?
Yes, and some, there's a golf course out at Claremont, they actually use recycled water out there. We're trying to use that more, but yeah, the reality is we've got people putting some of the world's finest drinking water onto lawns, and it's also some of the world's cheapest water. I was unaware of some of their Sydney prices, but we currently about $1.20 per 1,000 litres of water, so 1,000 litres of water for $1.20. I think in Sydney it's about $3.50, and they also have dynamic pricing. So when droughts kick in, they put their prices up to $3.70 to make it to encourage people to use less. So we charge very, very low for our water at the moment. For the actual the variable charges. Yeah.
So are those big water users the targets we should be aiming for, rather than, telling me to change my washers and, save whatever amount of water, but the big users, the ones who consume 65% of our water, are they the ones we should be, or you should be targeting, or are they just doing it as part of their business to become more water conscious, more water efficient in order to lower their overheads?
Yeah, that's certainly the case that to be water efficient is to be cost effective in those businesses. It's a reasonable size of their cost stack. We work with those industrial customers. We're looking at introducing water efficiency management plans for those companies as well. So definitely we'll be doing a lot of work with them. But we also believe that everybody plays a part, and it's probably not surprising, but in residential water use, 34% of water, if we've got to go with Victoria's statistics from the end-use studies, is used in the shower, and that is something that we certainly can control. We mentioned water efficient shower heads before. That's a program we're looking at rolling out residentially as well, and that would apply for tenants as well. We can save a lot of money, but it's also, there's the nexus of water and energy. So most of the energy is also used heating that water in a house. So that's a way that we can...
But that feels like it's our fault for the water prices, rather than it's everyone's fault. And
no,
users
I'm sorry if it sounded like that.
No,
it's absolutely no one's fault.
It's just it always comes back to the consumer.
Yeah.
When you've got golf courses and all these other big players who consume 65% of the water, and agriculture that spray it on the roads as well.
So the price increases
irrigation things
aren't about people using too much water. There's certainly about a network that's in a state of disrepair. So some of the statistics you heard that are disturbing is 91% of our sewage treatment plants are out of compliance with the EPA standards. Nowhere else in Australia that exists. We're losing 24% of the product that we produce
through the network.
Through the network, and also through metering issues and the like as well. So that's money it's water we can't charge for the way we measure that. So it's definitely not. We're not casting aspersions or blame on any particular customer type. It's to fix the network.
It's not intentional, but it's like we've got to do better at saving water, where your network's losing a quarter of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and we acknowledge that, and it's something that we're working really hard to address. So just in the last 2 years, we've reduced that figure by...
It's come down from about 30% down to 22.6.
Yeah, it's a good figure.
Yeah, and we're aiming for 14.
And I'm only showering once a month now. So
I didn't want to say anything.
We always appreciate your work around this table to the community, Councillor Harvey. Lord Mayor, question.
Thank you. So just clarifying, so treated water doesn't get used though for farms and things, does it still? Is that?
Yes, it does. So we produce reuse water, which the Coal River is the best example of it. So that's actually an oversubscribed scheme. We produce it to what we would call Class B, and those change different jurisdictions, but we call it Class B. That can be used on certain crops, but not on others. So you can't use it on any leaf crops. any fruits, etc. You can use it on fruit crops, but you're not allowed to walk across that land for a 24 hours, I think, that kind of thing. So there are restrictions on it. It's actually, as you'd imagine, because it's effectively the treated effluent that comes from sewage treatment plants that would normally, it's to EPA standards, and it would normally go back into the waterways, which is how it's been done, how it's done across the world. It's got a bit of nutrient richness in it, which farmers actually appreciate in some instances. So there is there is some cases where that's a high value, but no, for things like golf courses, you can't. The South Arm project, which I know there are different opinions on, but that's an excellent example of private investment in turning our Class B effluent into Class A effectively, which can then be used to irrigate golf courses without those restrictions. So over the next sort of 20, 30 years, that's where we would like to see our effluent go, and that's part of, as Dom mentioned, rationalising 110 sewage treatment plants. We've got one for every 1,800 people here. Some water companies, there are 150,000 people per water treatment plant. It's kind of crazy here. So, and they're inefficient. So if we can rationalise those, but as we're rationalising them, look at what they could deliver in the future and start building those things in now, so that we're kind of more prepared for that. Because once we've built an asset with a 50, 70-year life, it's very hard to retrofit, but we're trying to invest in a way now that gives us that opportunity with that sort of longer end game, which is part of what we're talking about is just with this proposal.
The other probably interesting fact is, and it might not be a surprise, but we're talking about a 4-year submission here today, but we plan in 50 and 100-year lots. So we're just finalising our state master plan. It's the first time we've ever done this. And so that's 9 regions across the state, and where we're actually master planning that so that we can build the right infrastructure and do the right kinds of consolidations without, so it's future-proof.
Just 2 more questions. One was just, I guess it flows on from that comment, because I'm just wondering about the link between infrastructure and planning and land use planning, and to what extent, which planning documents do you consult in making decisions about your infrastructure? Are you sort of looking at population projections, declining regions before you sort of, do a gold-plated system, or? And I guess the big question for Greater Hobart is the southern beaches, and obviously, like how, and we've been part of planning documents that don't seem to necessarily sort of really land with some agencies, and they're sort of talking about density and trying to get more density happening, but then it seems like not everyone's playing off the same planning documents.
So are you specifically talking about service introduction in the southern beaches?
That's an example, but to what extent is, like, which planning documents?
I can probably answer that one. For the master plans, everything they could get their hands on is the answer. Structure plans from councils, anything from the Tasmanian planning guys, the DSG, the works. It's been a long process putting those master plans together. I know they've put a couple of years of work into that, and we've engaged with councils, we've engaged with all sorts of bodies on that. So and the other thing is they're not carved in stone. They're going to be living, updating documents. So anytime council plans change, we want to hear about that as well. I know George always says that infrastructure is planning led. So we take a lot of lead from councils. Like, we want to hear about where you think growth is happening, but we also don't want to build stranded assets. So we're very careful about the way that we do it. But we consider everything that we can get our hands on, census information, the works.
And even, I guess, the kind of personal information, we actually presented a draft of those at the Elgate conference last year, and we laid them out at the tables with all the councillors there and said, what are we missing? We highlighted the sources of the information, but what are we missing that is just your feeling about how things are moving? And those things are important to note. I mean, they're not so much evidence-based, but experience and understanding, and you've completely missed a trick here. This is how the future's going to be for this area. We have to hear those voices.
It's funny though, because sometimes I know in Richmond, for example, people are saying, well, Richmond can't keep growing because there's not enough water. But then some people will say, well, no, we want to expand the growth boundary out there, and someone will fix it later down the track. I mean, how do we deal with that challenge of kind of politically driven planning and people just wanting to kind of expand, even though you know through your plan that in 10 years' time, you can't have, there is a limit to Richmond growing, otherwise you'd need to put in some, really high-end thing that would then, I guess that's just your
there's
life.
conversations we have going on all the time.
time.
We have a whole section at Taswater that do infrastructure investment planning, and they're constantly looking at what's needed in terms of sewerage capacity or water capacity for these areas as they grow now. Councils can sometimes all be a little ambitious on where they see growth happening, but we take a really pragmatic, realistic view of these things, and we're always wanting to have those chats with councils anytime that you've got areas that you want to point to.
What's the next stage for engagement on those regional plans? I believe we've
That's top
got
secret right now, Matt.
very soon.
You
mate.
may be hearing more about it at LGATS in November, so that we're just working on those,
Yes.
and we'll be bringing the next iteration of those to LGAT and having a discussion now about what those look like.
Thank you.
So one very final
Lord Mayor, one last one.
and it is related, it's a little bit separate, but just to flag that we had a forum in April about the LA fires, and I don't think Taswater was able to send someone to that, but that was or did you? I'm not sure.
Mark
Someone came,
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But just whether you, because there's something that came out of that was just the issues around water pressure and high fire danger days and everybody switching things on, and that we will have the same problem, I understand, as LA would in terms of pressure would be the same if everyone sort of hoses down their houses and their gardens. Are you doing any sort of community education about that really makes it very, very clear that the LA situation is not a unique situation if everyone behaves in the same way on extreme fire danger
I
days?
think there's an important thing to note, which is that our role is to provide drinking water, not to provide the water that fights fires. That's what the TFS do. So I don't know how the jurisdiction works in LA, but that is fundamentally our role. The water pressure that we provide and that we're obligated to provide is to maintain residential flow for residential use. So, but we do work very closely with the TFS, which is why I think Mark was at that thing. So I think it seems like a slight just trying to avoid the question, but that is an important thing, that responsibility doesn't formally sit with us, but we're acutely aware of the need to have those, which is why we work closely with the TFS, and I think Dom, you've looked into that a bit more.
It's a question we've had from a couple of different councils over time, and TFS always stress that they don't rely, especially TFS don't rely on our water supply. They'll take raw water from anywhere in terms of fighting a fire. They'll even take it out of the Derwent if they have to. It's not great for their equipment, but they'll think that's a problem that they'll solve afterwards if they need to. In terms of fire, it's always TFS that makes it, and we're happy to support them, but they sort of take the lead on communicating with the public around fire safety and what to do and what not to do.
Fire suppression systems will be different. Obviously, where you've got a fire suppression system, we are obliged to maintain the pressure to that, so if at any point it goes off, it will be there. So these are these costs, I think, that sit behind the people don't realise. People say, well, the water's free, it comes from the sky, but we have to have that ready to go so that every time a fire system is triggered, that pressure's there. We can't have a day off on that. So that's where we do have obligations as far as fire goes, is to make sure that we have
To the
those.
hydrants.
Hydrants, structure fires,
Yes.
fighting structure
Yeah.
fires more so than
Yeah.
bushfires. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what
And at that session, I understand, Mark did report back to the exec team after being, he said it was a great session, by the way, but that we would be looking at making some of our supplies available too, because the preference is not to send those Elvis choppers in to take salt water, because it really does corrode the equipment, so that we are working hand in glove.
Yeah.
But they do use they
will absolutely use any water.
They were
can get
pulling
their
out of
hands on,
Ridgeway
including
Dam
ours.
for the Mount Nelson fire recently. Yeah.
They often ring us and we tell them which is the best one to take.
But they're aware not to rely, because obviously in a fire, a fire can have an impact on our infrastructure as well. Like it can destroy a pumping station, it can destroy the power lines and things that we rely on to pump water places, and hence that's why they don't necessarily rely on us in a bushfire situation.
But I think the final point to make is that we would do everything we could
Yeah.
to make sure that everybody had what they needed.
Correct.
And work very hard to make sure that was a reality.
Councillor Kelly.
So the equivalent tenement system,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be simplified, is it?
Simplified, gone.
Gone.
Completely
Well,
gone,
we're
so you just
we're
go
proposing that it's
totally on
gone.
water usage.
Yeah, so there's a discharge factor applied so that it becomes volumetric sewage as opposed to the rather odd way that we factor in at the moment. So when I arrived and I was flicking through the ET methodology, universities, for example, it's how many full-time students the university has, urinal lengths, number of basins, toilets. So as you can see, it's very hard to actually understand that. So it just becomes far simpler to have this discharge factor, which, depending on what kind of property it is charged on that factor.
Yeah, that's great news, so well done there. A couple other quick questions.
Has to be approved yet though, John, that's the important.
Yeah, it's a proposal, but we're passionate about that one.
I just say as when if you're billing businesses for it as a landlord, you try and explain it too. Sure, it's basic if you want to go and do the research, but small business people, for instance, a little coffee shop, they've got, I'm just looking at an invoice now for one, you've got your 20mm fixed water charge, you've got full fixed sewage charge at so many ETs, you've got trade waste category 2A, you've got variable water charge at such and such, you've got another variable water charge. You know, they look at it and if they want to start pulling it apart, they get very confused and angry and all that. So I'm just a great disciple of the keep it simple system, and people can just get their head, otherwise they just sort of throw their hands in the air and walk away, and the more confused they get, the less attention to detail they'll take with water consumption and all that. So the simplification of the billing and understanding of it, I think, is absolutely paramount. People would invest a little bit more, I think, in their attitude and the way they look at the whole system. So it's good news to hear that at least it's being looked at. The fixed charge to a vacant block of land in residential areas in Hobart, for instance, $220 a quarter. So what are your comments on that? Is that going to go down, up, or stay the same? Or what's proposed there? You did touch on some.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, because we have to be ready to plug that block in at 30 days notice. So we have to have the water pressure, we have to have the treatment processes, we have to all that in place. We can't make an assumption that that will never get filled. So it is costing us to have the water ready to go onto that block. So which is why we pass those charges on. And the issue with the move to increase, obviously, the variable component being a higher portion of the bill, we'll see that move, because obviously if no water's going through that meter, then the fixed cost will go down. So that $176 reduction in those fixed costs would apply straight away there. So
a vacant block of land, simply put, will stay the same or reduce?
No, it will drop, because its fixed charge will drop and its variable charge will remain at zero. So you'll see all of that 176 drop would come off immediately.
Okay, so even though there's a sewage line there, they wouldn't be charged for the sewage line?
The sewage
it's not being
charges,
used?
I don't have the exact numbers. I think the discharge factor for that, because currently you've got a solid fixed sewage charge, that moves through, I can't remember the ratios, I think it may be 90% is fixed and 10% is variable. That 10% has a discharge factor, so, and I believe on vacant blocks that's zero. So you would effectively pay, you'd have the 90% drop there, so you would have that drop of the $176 drop from the fixed component. Again, this is for an average block, but the $176 drop in the fixed component of the water charge, and you'd have a smaller drop, but a drop nonetheless in the sewage charge.
It's just that I get a bit of feedback too with people who buy a block of land, and this planning takes so damn long, and getting quotes and waiting, and people getting spooked for building at the moment and just sitting on it. You know, they say that we're getting $1,000 a year bill for just doing nothing, and over 2 or 3 years, or even 5 years, I've seen blocks sit around for now. It's $5,000, but they're behind.
Yeah.
If I take your point of look, the system's there. Well, I suppose we could debate this for hours as to the method. At the end of the day, I know you've got to get to a set point to charge what you want to get at the other end, and that's fair enough. But how that's divvied up is always complex. But yeah, I just think that fixed block thing's a bit steep. But anyway, otherwise it's good to hear that the investment's now going into it. And you've probably inherited a lot of the stuff that's been neglected. I know how the government works at times. In times 30 years ago when it was sailing along to keep the prices down, nothing's been invested. And that's when this should have been done 20 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, it's a problem that's happening worldwide. There's a water crisis in the UK at the moment for this exact same reason. Like just lack of investment over the years. People don't think much about water and sewer infrastructure
Until it's an issue.
Until it's an issue. It's like refereeing. You don't notice it until it's bad. Suddenly.
And we've seen it with Tasports. Just one last quick thing. There's a crisis and we need federal government funding to fix a wharf that's falling apart. Well, I might have thought there'd been someone doing a repairs and maintenance schedule or asset schedule thing instead of letting it go. So, no, it's good to see that all this is happening. So, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Before I come back to Councillor Harvey, anybody else have any comments they want to make? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. With regard to the decommissioned or the to-be decommissioned facilities, what's the process with that? Are you aware of how you'll be handling those assets once they're decommissioned? Will they be sold? Will they be transferred for council use or, for development? Or will they be kept as an asset within Taswater?
Yeah, and that's largely case by case. I think if they're adjacent to other assets, we can look at keeping those. There are some, we've been divesting some small dams and weirs across the state. We've been getting rid of a few of those over the last couple of years. Those are often, they're on private property and we've sold them for $1 to the owner so that they could just transfer the ownership of that back. So there's a range of different ways. Sometimes it can be land swaps with, for instance, down at the Mac Point, some of the movement of the land around there is about moving some of the land around so we can build what we need and other areas and Tasports can do what they need. So it's very much case by case. I think there are some fairly high profile pieces of land in the future that they'd be public interested in what we were doing.
So I'm thinking specifically ones I know, Prince of Wales Bay, Berrydale and Bridgewater.
Green Point, while you're out that way, yeah.
Which one?
Green Point's another one that's a nice piece of
Yeah, the Green Point one.
Right, Council, very interested in Green Point.
Yeah. So that's where I'm heading. Anyway, I want it. No. So they'll be decommissioned and removed from the site. Those
That would be the plan, yeah. Now sometimes they replace with pump stations. So Prince of Wales Bay would like to be replaced with a pump station, which would have a smaller footprint, and there may be something we could do with the land around that. But again, this all comes down to, I guess, that longer term master plan of what goes to where is what you replace the assets with, and whether you end up with a complete blank piece of land, or whether you need some form of asset on there. So we, it could be that we need to maintain a piece of an access to the pipes. So some of them we could get away clean, but yeah, they're all there. Every one of these is going to be unique, but I think we're aware that there will be community value and interest in some of the larger ones. So
that's what I'm thinking.
We would, when we were thinking about what we were doing, would consider that.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Gentlemen, a couple from me. If you can take us back to the slide with the colours, the reds and the greens, because I'm sitting close enough to the screen and perhaps the members might be interested. I'm just
to be clear, by the way, all these still taken from our public-facing submission, so these are all living
Publicly
documents that are publicly available. So.
The two on the drinking water quality risk improvement side, the two reds are actually in our electorate in our city.
One of those is St Mary's on the east coast.
Fingal.
Oh, sorry, the one. My
Yeah,
apologies.
yeah.
The one which is Greater
St Mary's,
Hobart.
yes.
Well, can you just talk to us about what that risk is? What is the problem with the infrastructure to our residents for the drinking water?
Dom, do you know more about that one?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check on what exactly they're referring to there.
Yeah, we can get back to you on that
Yeah,
one.
I can come back to you on that one.
Yeah, I can see it's a UV treatment system that they're looking at there.
Yeah.
Which isn't enormous. So, yeah, we'll get more information on that one.
Yeah, thanks. If you can provide more information on that one and also the orange high risk, which is Ridgeway Dam above it, just so that we're aware of. I think Fern Tree as well. No, just those two.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. And the final point from me was, I'm sure hopefully you're aware of the McRae landslip incident in Victoria.
Yeah, Southeast Water, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we might need to have a look at as well, but that's got a little bit to play out in terms of, I think, what the actual cost to these organisations, the council and their water body, Southeast Water, will be. How confident are we that we aren't going to have something similar, given the state of the infrastructure, where we've got a leaking pipe that's leaking for months or years and destabilises a whole chunky hillside, given the hilly nature of Hobart. Are we confident that that's the case? And as I said, it's a question for our stormwater team as well. But are we confident?
In my 5 or so years with Taswater, that risk has never been raised in any conversation, which is not to say it doesn't exist, but it's not something that I've heard that has been identified. So, and we're pretty confident that we are. I think the important thing is we're beginning to track down those leaks, which is you'll read elsewhere talk of installing 200 odd what are called district metered areas, and just very quickly what that does is it's a way of finding those leaks, which is how we've got the 30% down to 22. You set up these areas, you understand where water's flowing at 2 in the morning where it shouldn't be, you know there's a leak in that direction and you can help track them down. I'm guessing that would be a bulk main that caused that kind of leak.
Yeah, it's a large volume of water.
Yeah, so I mean I've seen, we do have those things, but I mean generally I've never seen that risk identified that would cause a landslip in that way.
Yeah, it would be good to understand if that risk is, if you've not done the analysis, just in terms of seeing 19 houses and a badly injured worker.
Yeah.
I think and I don't think they know what the consequences are yet. I think that will come.
That's right, and look, the Australian water industry is looking at this as a case study, and certainly on our risk registers, this is something that we're looking at and how we tackle it systemically.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen, and providing us with an update on Taswater and the change in billing. I'm sure you're going to circulate a little bit more information to us later on, as well as information to contact the regulator, I believe. So we look forward to seeing those emails in due course.
Terrific.
Thank you
for having us in. Yeah.
Cheers,
gentlemen.
All right. So we might move on to item 7.2, elected members, which is the reforms to council numbers and allowances, which we've heard of through state government and the local government review. And I'll hand over to Michael to introduce the item.
Thanks, Chair. So look, obviously we've provided a paper in the agenda, and I'll go through the points where the government are seeking feedback in respect of the discussion paper that was released last month. I'll also, and you'll probably see in the paper where we provided some rationale and comments on the rationale that the government have put forward for supporting the reform, because I think there's a couple there where council might be interested in passing some comment across to the government. So if you turn your attention to the screen, I'll just go through and really probably, Chair, just pause at each one to see whether councillors have any contribution that they want to make. So the first, again, these are not, the government aren't asking for comments on this, but again, I think it probably behooves us to consider it. So that one of the reforms is that there's high numbers of councillors. Again, that's something that, again, staff have agreed. There's little doubt that we have a high number of local government representatives, clearly illustrated in comparison in the discussion paper. I think that one's quite reasonably argued in respect of the reform. But again, it's perhaps a band-aid solution across a broader council reform process. Would be a comment.
Yep. Anyone have any? Anyone just get my attention if you want to say anything? On Bluefield.
It's interesting about the Hobart and Glenorchy comparative, because it's an awful lot harder to get elected in Hobart than it is in Glenorchy. So the inconsistency of representation, I almost suspect that the reason we have 12 versus 10 is simply because ordinary Joe who wants to run for this, you normally had to run for at least twice to get in, whereas it's not as likely in Glenorchy to do so, nor do you have to spend nearly the money either. So when we start pulling in the numbers, we start narrowing the pool of potential people. I mean, even moving down to 9 from 12 in this particular room, you're almost guaranteed that we'll have the same faces next time, because the level of public knowledge of who we are, our profile, has to be so profoundly large now. I'm not really sure that was actually what we probably intended to change.
No. But I guess the point in terms of the Glenorchy is that there's been inconsistency in terms of previous reforms where councils have, like Glenorchy, have accepted the reform, which has then created this inequities or the differences between ourselves and Glenorchy is a good one. I operated at Warrato Wynyard, for instance, with 8 councillors when I was there, which they jumped at that chance. And so, again, it's different to what Burnie and other councils of that size. So is that inconsistency is reasonably well agreed. One of the rationales is low paid for councillors, and the comment we've put for that is, while there's agreed that the low pay for councillor is problematic, it's not necessarily agreed that the proposed 14.25 average increase is enough of a change. Like for us, for instance, that would increase the current council allowance from 43,700 to just over 51,000, which is not going to make a meaningful difference in attracting people to fulfil the role. And equally, the allowances for the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor's roles are not proposed to increase by the reform. It's just the councillor allowance. So again, there's lack of incentive in terms of people wanting to take those roles. So again, they're not asking for comment on that, but that's just a comment that we've put forward. I guess we're interested in your perspective on that. So.
Yeah.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I quite often I hear a lot from the business side, and it's only part of the whole population, of course. It's just, if you're trying to do it from a financial point of view, you just can't do it. So you're immediately wiping out a big chunk of our community from people who are more business orientated to want to put their hand up and do it. It's just simply a matter of fact.
Yeah. Alderman Bloomfield? Sorry.
And some people, no problem, they can afford to do the time and all that, but the low allowance does distract a lot of people. If we want a blend of business and non-business, which is the preferred model from my point of view, and no doubt everyone else's, this certainly doesn't address it at all.
Now, well, I did some analysis for John last year, and I think if you apply that in terms of the amount of time that elected members need to put into the role, it's about $50 an hour is what that works out as, is what it is, which is pretty low.
It's more through the interruption too. You could say you're getting $100 an hour, but you do some of these things, it just wipes out half a day of other appointments and the ability to do stuff, particularly in the daytime. That's why I was never really a big fan of the 4 o'clock start and all that, but that's what happens, that's what happens. But the more that's chipped away at the edges there, the less of a business perspective and small business orientation on council you're going to get with the whole thing. But if that's why people want it, that's what's going to happen, I guess.
Alderman Bloomfield and Lord Mayor. Alderman Bloomfield.
Thank you. Firstly, I think there was another page analysis as well, which actually pointed out that this difference actually gave them a kickback. It actually didn't distribute all of the savings. They actually had a net lower overall payment, which I thought was disappointing. Secondly, it's interesting that you've costed out $50 an hour. I charge out $329, so that's how much I'm losing every time I turn up. And the other thing is that if you looked at Average Joe, who is on an award, $50 doesn't go far either, and it certainly doesn't particularly acknowledge the skill sets required. We now have a requirement for all the additional training that anyone who wants to nominate needs to do, and that is not exactly, it's not like grade 10 material we're going to be reading. We're going to be reading and understanding legislative requirements, which is almost a tertiary level of explanation and understanding. And that should be therefore recognised, I think, at a much higher level. Certainly when we have people who turn up to, say, risk and audit and other boards, they have an hourly rate which is far excess of $50 an hour as well, and yet we are on the largest boards looking after an awful lot of responsibility, and $50 an hour doesn't seem to really cut it. I would have thought that we would have been looking at around about 75,000 plus for an elected member, and something with appropriate for the deputy and Lord Mayor, because that would actually start to bring it in line. It also makes us, should remind us too, that if we need to pay around about $18,000 simply to get elected, That's nearly 50% of what you'll bring in the following year if you do get elected, and none of that's going to be a tax deduction. So it actually means that if you want to genuinely have a go and not have an alternative income, which some people do actually do that, they actually need to have a partner who's got additional income, or they need to be living on passive income, which further reduces the capacity of most people to actually consider this role. I don't think we should be pushing towards effectively what is an allegiance model. It worries me a lot, because I think that this role should be available to anyone. I do think the standard of education should be high, absolutely, but I do also think that it should be remunerated appropriately. I'm interested to note, I'm probably noticing later, but the superannuation component being brought in was also interesting. So,
Lord Mayor, then Councillor Kitsos. Lord Mayor.
Just a comment that my understanding, and I was just at a Legat meeting before this, I wasn't aware that this formula, or there's been a formula developed that includes length of roads in a municipality.
Well, that's the next part. Yeah, that's right. But yeah.
And I just think that's an odd way to structure work, remuneration for work.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just thought we could. I mean, I appreciate they're maybe trying to work out the level of work, but it really
You're trying to work out distribution in terms of the length that you have to travel, and there's a whole, and that's the next actual rationale. But
I think it's a strange.
Yeah.
Can we come back to that one a little bit on that point, Councillor Kitsos?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of our comments that we're providing back on in our submission, if we could strengthen that first paragraph, I think that would be reflective of my thoughts and what I'm hearing from other people around the room today, is that it's 14.25% is not enough of a change. And for me, it's it's a bit insulting that they're only considering redistributing the allowances from elected members that may not have their job anymore following this reduction of numbers, rather than actually a genuine increase from the state government in recognition of the hours that we all contribute to our jobs. So it seems a little bit disingenuous that they're not actually fronting up any more money to support local government in that space. And I agree with the comments from Alderman Bloomfield that you want to attract, and Councillor Kelly, if you want to attract all sorts of different people to this role, it needs to be remunerated effectively. And the hours that we work and the structure of the whole organisations needs to be open to a wide range of people. So although this is a start, I hope that this is not all we see over the next couple of years. I hope we see a genuine increase.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Kitsos. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Kitsos that the first needs to be boosted up, that 14% would do nothing in terms of professionalising being a councillor, if that makes sense, because I forget we get paid until you get the email through, because you don't do this for the money, that's for sure. And I completely agree with both Councillor Kelly from the perspective of we will never get business people, we will never get professionals who are successful in private world coming to this role, given the time demands and restraints for the pitiful offset. Just the opportunity cost is too great. And I agree with Alderman Bloomfield as well when it comes to the risk of councils, especially in the capital cities, I think, because I would imagine that our time commitments are probably significant, and our, the pressures in this council, for example, are probably significantly more than some of the smaller councils, but we will never get people who, like a broad cross-section of people, we'll always get people who are able, for whatever reason, to make the sacrifice, and I think that costs the city. I know that a handful of other jurisdictions pay the councillors as a proper job, and I know that would be politically unpopular, but I think it should probably be the long-term vision in terms of absolutely reducing the numbers, but if you want professionals, you've got to pay for professionals, and if we can pay a professional wage and attract in some successful business-minded people with, and you know, people across all sorts of professions, as well as life experience roles where people, then they might be in a frontline sort of blue-collar job, and they're able to actually give up that job to do this role because the pay is equivalent. But I think the comment could be strengthened that, well, that it's kind of like, yeah, okay then, add the 14%, but there's no way that will have any impact on professionalising or attraction.
Yeah, no, I'll do that.
I'll just add one remark briefly, which is I agree with everything that has been said. I think that this is probably one of the key things for not just talent at council, but as Councillor Elliott says, diversification of who can represent council. And although there's been some language focusing on business people, I would point out that, and Alderman Bloomfield mentioned her hourly rate, that if you're a salaried worker that is expected to show up for a shift of any form, one council meeting means you can't go to work for 12 hours. In my case, I can't go to work on a council day if I have a single meeting. I can't suddenly stop an ambulance shift and come to a council meeting and then go back to my ambulance shift. It means I don't go to work for the day. And I think Councillor Elliott mentioned spouses as well. The other reason I can be here is because my spouse is highly paid. That's it. And I think that's why there's no public servants in frontline roles that are on councils across the state. So, agree wholeheartedly. CEO, next item.
So the next... Oh, sorry.
Oh, Councillor Harvey.
Well, you all know the deal when you sign up. So I'm happy to have a boost in pay for councillors and deputy mayors and Lord mayors. Happy to see that wage go up. But what is the satisfaction level? You know, what's the sweet spot that's going to attract, you know, the right people to become councillors? And then does it become more of an exclusive club rather than a community representative body of people who understand why they run, why they get elected, rather than those who think, well, that's not a bad lurk, you know, I might have a crack at council because I'm, you know, retired or whatever, but it's not a bad income. So I'm just cautious about how we approach this, that we don't dissuade ordinary people from having a go at council, who don't have whatever the degrees are or the level of experience, but they still qualify to run because they've gone through all of the modules or whatever the you know, whatever they have to do to be able to be eligible to run. So if we focus on just the money side of it, I think it might change the nature of local government. But that's just, you know, a few thoughts out there.
Yeah. I think the average Joe probably can't afford to take this job, which is what's limiting. I signed up for it, but that doesn't mean the rest of the ambulance service can do it if they want to.
No, they don't have to do it.
Yeah,
See
can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Kelly, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, I hear what you're saying, I understand your logic in some regards, but it's one thing to say, well, they know what to sign up for, but that's not making it right.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to say, how can we make this better?
And I agree.
But your comment of saying you're signing up for what it is, well, that's not what this is about. This is how can we get more people,
But
you
through
know.
your chair across the table. But if it's 60, 70 or 80, that's not going to make a difference to someone who earns $250,000 a year. You know, so who's it, like I think Councillor Elliott said, you know, whether it's 50 or 70, still not going to attract a much bigger field. It'll attract a slightly bigger field.
Through your chair across the table, yeah, it could, it's opening the door, I think, and even if you get one small corner shop person, you might go, actually, that extra
Maybe
10 grand or whatever it is, 15 grand, I just got to appeal to more people. You look at the 44 people we had put up the hand up there, you know, a lot of them last time, it's skewed to a certain type of demographic and type of person and all that, and nothing wrong with those people, but I'm just saying we've got to spread the appeal to a bigger range of people is all I'm saying. And you've got to look at the makeup of this council, it's so similar to that.
Excellent, councillors. Let's move on to the next
that's
item.
good feedback, thank you. To pick up the Lord Mayor's point, so I think the reform, so the idea is to broaden the methodology in terms of elected member numbers, in terms of how you determine that. And so they've expanded it to include population size, the total value of approved development applications, the total written down value of infrastructure assets, the urbanisation, which is based on the Australian classification of local governments, and the kilometre of sealed road, as the Lord Mayor pointed out, which is about trying to factor in the different, the complexities and the breadth of the responsibilities in each of the municipal areas. I mean, we've made a note there that operation and capital budgets, I think, would be an equally good measure in terms of complexity and scale. I mean, you council here make a decision on a $200 million budget every year. There's not many organisations in Tasmania that do that, you know, and so that's again something that probably could be factored in. But I think they've put a lot of thought and rationale into the model again. So,
Lord Mayor, do you want to pick up your point?
Yeah, I just thought kilometres of sealed road was just a rather odd metric. Like, it'd be better just to do sort of square kilometres.
yeah, well, that's right. Could be square kilometres.
Of an area. But even that, I mean, you know, I just don't think that potentially picks up the kind of the difference between different councils. I mean, somewhere like King Island, it's almost like staff numbers is an impact too. It's like
Yeah, it's a fair
apparently
point.
you're on King Island, the LGAT people were saying that all of their elected members do any submissions they write the submissions because they don't have enough staff to write sort of submissions to government. So this, you know, to what extent are the councillors picking up the load of staff?
I've not heard that before.
Anyway, I don't have the answer as to what is the right formula, but it was just it seemed. But I think you've captured enough just for us to say we don't think that the formula's right. I guess we could. It'd be nice to be able to suggest what is the right formula, but it's pretty hard to do that.
I think to put the work into it would be, that's where I got to. I'm thinking, oh, look, because where they've gotten to in terms of the recommended numbers, they're not too bad, I don't think.
I think Clarence had a big jump up because of their roads, didn't they, compared to Glenorchy and Hobart?
Yeah, so Clarence still would have 9 members, down from 12. So,
no, I think more
but
in terms of the
salaries,
salaries.
yeah, that's changed, yeah. So.
And is that because they've come up to equal with Hobart, or have they gone beyond Hobart?
No, they're equal with Hobart.
Equal, so yeah.
Yeah, so Clarence, Hobart and Launceston are the same in terms of the allowance rate. So. All right.
Councillor Elliott?
Sorry.
I definitely think what you're saying, Michael, about having the budget, because that sort of change in governance responsibility is important. I can see why they've put, you know, and I agree with having an approach around square kilometres of the region. They'd want to make sure that, you know, the Western Midlands and compared to King Island or whatever were that disparity was accounted for, but it is definitely relevant, the size of the budget and you know, staff and the labour costs all come underneath that, but if you can make sure you get that in there, that's a relevant factor, because there's a big difference between carrying the accountability for 200 versus 2 million or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could I make one comment to
Yeah, Councillor Gill,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just look at the size of the planning scheme, the buildings and all that we're doing from Battery Point to waterfront. We're talking about walkways to bike tracks to big buildings. With all due respect to some of the smaller councils out there, they're probably improving the 2 o'clock at an old oval. Is a highlight for them, and yeah, that's just the way it is. And it's for us to get the same amount of money as to council. Interesting enough, Hobart Council used to be 9 people too, back in the day.
When I started, it was 9,000, and I think we got 140% pay rise.
Yes.
Good number.
First one? Yeah.
All right, see next item.
All right, so these are the actual items that the discussion paper have sought our views on. So one is around managing a quorum management. So obviously the quorums for the across Tasmania would go from between 3 to 5. So And so what we've said there is the reform process should include measures to address quorum management, as it will be a concern for councils with the reduction of elected members, and I think focusing on flexible remote participation should be enabled for council and committee meetings to enable easier participation. Equally for I think what we've come up with in terms of the approach for committees, I think is something that should be explored elsewhere as well, in terms of that flexibility. But again, whether there's issues around conflicts of interest, how they're managed, those sorts of things, I guess that's for you guys to have a discussion about, because that's the most likely sort of impediment is when they come up, and then you have a quorum issue. So,
Councillor Harvey.
Just with quorums, with regard to all committees and things, is there room for the CEO to make the decisions if there's no quorum, or for the director to make the decision? Like I think we did once upon a time in planning, and we didn't have a quorum, then it automatically reverted to the director to approve or refuse.
well, that's in planning, and that delegation probably exists. I'm not sure. I'd have to double check, but that's for land use planning. But
why couldn't that happen in council meetings? If you haven't got a quorum, people haven't turned up for whatever reasons, decisions need to get made.
No, well, yes and no. I mean, it's not a very good democracy if
People don't turn up.
No, if the CEO's making those calls.
Yeah, but people don't turn up.
So
I think
the delegations we can put something in there around delegations. So,
I think there needs to be delegation. If things are urgent, then it has to go through the delegation to the CEO. If it's time restrictive.
I think in addition to that, on this point for me, the remote participation, I think I'm very supportive of that for workshops and committees. I'm not overly supportive. I think we should have to show up to council meetings in person.
Yeah, I agree.
But for like if you're interstate on holidays and you want to dial in to a council workshop, you should be able to do that. So I would strongly support that for the lower level meetings. Any other comments on this item? Nope, next one.
So the next one is superannuation. So we put forward two options there to councillors to comment on. So obviously the discussion paper talks about the 9% superannuation equivalent payment that not a lot of people actually know happened, to 12% from June last year. So the options are, obviously you're not employees of the council, so there's the option of maintaining the status quo, and in terms of the equivalent payment that has been made. The alternate would be to seek to have councillors legislated and determined in the same way a company director is, and paid at the SGA, the super guarantee contribution rate, and so the councillors could be deemed to be an employee for superannuation purposes, and that would be legislated under the Local Government Act. So again, that's something for council to have a discussion about.
That would bring it in line with the expectation that we see with subcontractors, allowances and other payments. I note that there's actually an actual exemption for elected members, and that's why we don't. But if that didn't exist, there would be no way we didn't. So it's just one of those anomalies that I think needs to be repaired and seen to, given that that's the level of expectation of the community, I think now. I have to go, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Councillor Kelly.
Look, I'd consider it a paper nightmare for myself, and if it happens to me, other people think the same way, and just another layer of bureaucracy and forms to fill out and submissions to do it in a financial year. I mean, I've got my own self-managed super fund, as a lot of business people do, and it's going to be absolutely meaningless. By the time I pay someone to do stuff to go through this, it's going to be probably cost neutral or negative. So it's fine some people, but a lot of other people, it's not so. If you ask me my opinion, personally,
Status quo. Yeah.
I'm totally against it.
Yeah.
It should be made up in compensation.
Yeah.
It's like all our allowances, if I may say so too. That all this fuel and all this other stuff. We should be the work that creates for the administration here, and all the cards and all that sort of stuff. It should just be a lump sum. I mean, and all these little things. It's just keep it simple.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, I agree. From a recruitment marketing lens, I'd prefer to bundle the number up and make it as high as you could, and say that it includes A, B, C, and D. So don't want the extra admin with the super. There might be more tax breaks, but anyway, But I think it should be one bundled number with an expectation that includes all of these things, but then you can get these things. But you bundle into it travel and whatever else. But it's the bigger figure you can get from just from a psychological point of view.
It's a saving in administration.
And,
Look how much
yeah.
time they spend here doing it. It's phenomenal.
I feel contrary to that. I think that there's a reason why superannuation was introduced as a psychological tool. We know that as a populace, the ageing baby boomer cohort that were on fixed benefits is going to cost the next generation and my generation an enormous amount of money, which is why the Australian Future Fund exists, to pay for those fixed benefits. And they were a product of people knowing that in retirement you need money. And so we know that, you know, there's pressures on young families, there's pressures on everybody to spend money now and keep up with the Joneses to a degree as well. And unless we're forced to put money to the side for our retirement, then it will fall upon the taxpayer to fund our retirement in the future. That's why super exists. I don't understand why councillors are any different to any other employee. As Alderman Bloomfield points out, that everyone else has super, and I don't see why, especially in a role like the Lord Mayor's role, which is a full-time job, to not be paid super and to have to pull your own tax out and have 50 grand sitting there for your tax bill at the end of the year. So it's a bit of a weird way to do things. CEO.
Oh, yeah, technically you're not employees, so that's...
Yeah,
you know,
well, yeah,
so-
of course, yes.
so,
Could we not be viewed, some people say we're contractors. Contractors don't get superannuation.
I think they do get...
But only if you're a full-time contractor for an individual. There's reasonable if you work for me, my business, and you're just about all your income is deemed to be from me, yes, that happens. But in the great majority of contractors, no. And once again, an electrician comes to fix a power point at your house, you don't pay him super. You don't pay him a travel rate, or some out-of-country places do. But you know, and we're only here for a shelf life. You know, we've got to reapply for this job every 4 years, and so it depends which lens you look at that for. There's a strong argument to say that we are more like contractors and employees.
Definitely.
Next item, CEO.
Well, there's only one more, which is just whether that should be, whether we're setting the foundations for future reviews, whether the methodology and the ongoing review framework should be embedded in legislation. And for mine, I think it's a no-brainer that it should be, but...
I agree.
Well, it's not as obvious as what you might think, so, yeah. So is any... That's... All right, so really it's around, there's a little bit of disagreement around the superannuation, so that we'll have to just work out how we manage that at the council meeting, I guess. But that's all I need to be able to put a paper up at the next council meeting, so...
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. All right, so we'll move on to the final item in the open, I think, which is 7.3 Central Hobart Plan for an annual update. Miss Avey and Miss Lawley. Yeah. Oh, I can see my I'll hand over to you guys.
Okay. Alright, so this update will cover how things are tracking on the Central Hobart Plan, as well as provide an update on the planning scheme amendments associated with Central Hobart, as well as give an update on how we're tracking overall in the strategic land use planning team, and then we'll do some Q&A, anything to do with any of the topics we cover. So if you've had a chance to look at the slide pack, I think it's exciting to see that so many of the projects that we've been working on over the years have reached implementation phase. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we've been working on, and I said at the PIA conference a few weeks ago, it's been so nice that we've had this strategic vision and we've been working at the vision and chipping away at it for a number of years now. without it losing focus or needing to pivot. So that's been really nice for us as a team. So the way I'm going to sort of break down where we're at with the Central Hobart Plan today is to talk about the different streams of parallel work that we're constantly working on for Central Hobart. We've got the actual implementation program with those 6 big umbrella priority actions, but we've also got all the work that we're doing with the related strategies and other strategies that are currently under development, making sure we're not doubling up on actions and making sure that things are accounted for across both the Central Hobart Plan and particularly things like the open space strategy and the transport strategy and the climate strategy. We've been in lockstep with the other officers. And as well as just touch base on how things have been going in the advocacy and partnership space, particularly for myself and Jaime. We've been doing a lot of work in key stakeholder groups for other big state projects. Okay, so just with ongoing advocacy, so this covers many things, and partnerships I'll go into next, but I think it's important to understand in terms of grant applications, these sorts of things have taken up considerable time, and we've also done a lot of submissions in terms of the DAPs, coastal policies. State government has sort of been on hiatus for a couple of months now, but we're expecting that they'll start picking up again, and we'll start needing to do all the submissions that we were doing, particularly towards 2023 and 2024, there was a lot. We're also in that advocacy space. As you might be aware, you've got the Hobart to Glenorchy Advocacy Project. That's the H2G PIA project around densification along our northern transit corridor. And of course, our ongoing involvement in the Planning Institute of Australia, PIA, all of their active projects, as well as all the workshops and committees. We try to attend the committee workshops as often as we can, giving people updates and getting feedback on all the strategies and projects. Partnerships, this is where we are a lot more involved in the day-to-day running of things. We've certainly had an officer involved from the beginning on the Strellis project, as well as having Adele, who was leading the project, working at under the umbrella of City of Hobart. The transit corridor project that has been continuing, and that's something that I've been involved in across from Glenorchy and as well as here, and we're looking to secure and moving into that project. We'll have an update once government has settled. Things were sort of put on pause there for that period. And then we've got our continual strategic planners working group that is still one of the working groups that has continued, and that is a lot of the head of strategic planning across all of the Greater Hobart areas meeting quite regularly to talk about all the projects happening. And then in terms of the improving residential standards and the medium design density guidelines, we were in the working groups for those projects. And then we've got, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Innovation Precinct Forum and the work there, as well as I think Karen might touch on where we're sitting with the incentives package for housing. So there's been a lot of work happening, and these projects, some of them will be continuing into this next year, some of them won't, some have reached a conclusion. So ongoing. So in terms of what I'm just going to focus on now, so the 6 priority actions, each action is an overarching action. There's lots of other sub-actions under each. Most of them are either underway or completed. Which is great to see. It's been a very busy year for the teams. I've got timelines to talk about, but I'll talk about that at the end. The first one, of course, is our Innovation Precinct project, and it was great to attend the Innovation Precinct Task Force launch. Ben is here, and it looks like we'll be having the 6 workshops until April next year, and it's aiming to develop a program, a prospectus, but also just having all the right people in the room to have these really interesting conversations around what they see the future of that precinct and trying to create that sense of identity and understanding of it as a precinct. So that was interesting, and being able to field their questions and working out. There's some fantastic businesses that are co-located in the precinct or show interest in being co-located in the precinct, and it was just fascinating to hear from all of them. The nighttime economy and attracting those key industries, I've said that the progress on them is ongoing. I think that's something that we are continually working on at Council. And in terms of planning scheme amendments, that is they would be specific planning amendments that may come out of the precinct task force work. So they would be separate to the ones that we've already got going on at the moment. So the goal 1, in terms of the priority action, the idea was to also develop potentially master plans of inside the precinct, working with some really key agencies, estate agencies, or key landowners, and that would be something that we'd like to see come out of the process of the task force. So that's just something to keep in mind, and that is why the planning scheme amendments associated with that project are still, haven't progressed until that work is complete. So for priority action 2, this was around our street improvement plans. And just a bit of context, I think it's always good to remind ourselves that the actions that are in the Central Hobart Plan, they were written at a time prior to us having our transport strategy endorsed and prior to a lot of things falling into place. I like to think our transport team are really running a great tight ship at the moment. They've done fantastic work. And so some of these actions we were tasked, and we made sure that they were put into the Central Hobart Plan so that they were put into a document at the time, given that we didn't have a transport strategy. So we'll sort of roll back some of those actions that are in here in terms of our prioritisation, which I'll talk to in a second. But in terms of the Elizabeth Street Vision Plan, that we're in the final stages of the background study work. There's been a lot of survey work done, and they'll be reported back early in the next year. And the plan is, under a new urban design lead in Jaime's absence, that we'll be running these co-design workshops with the key stakeholders. And in terms of sustainability and shared infrastructure, I think some of those sorts of key actions they're sort of ongoing, but we haven't had discernible projects come out of those aspirations yet that were in the plan. But certainly the pedestrian and micromobility improvements along the lines of Collins Street, that's certainly, as we know, underway. So this really has been the focus across both teams, both the urban design team and the strategic planning team, the building heights and built form planning controls. So throughout this last year, we've had Hoddle & Co preparing their built form analysis, and then we've been developing the built form controls in response. And I think the Hobart Rivulet, as we've seen through certain key projects, as the opportunity presents itself with the developer, that's when we'll be really trying to work at, is there opportunities as developments come online to daylight the Hobart Rivulet as part of that development. And we've seen that through the Watch On DA process. And we're coming to the end of the planning scheme amendment process for the built form controls. Sorry, we're coming to the end of drafting the planning scheme amendment for the built form. So in terms of going into it in a little bit more detail, there was a working group across council which was established, and we went through and analysed Central Hobart, picked out those really key blocks that were blocks that had a whole range of different controls and development potential, as well as different settings and yields, as well as whether or not they were the sorts of blocks that we could see significant development delivered on. And these were the blocks that were settled on, and these were the blocks that were tested. So the testing, in essence, was just to review the planning scheme amendments that were proposed through the Central Hobart work. So it was really trying to make sure that what we're putting forward in any planning scheme amendments stands up to capacity testing. To take it one step further, this capacity testing has then been reviewed by Savills, who've looked at making sure that the work that we've undertaken hasn't meant that feasibility has dropped. And that was something that was critical to this work, that we're looking at trying to make sure things are highly feasible and that we're not putting any handbrakes on by having planning scheme controls that just aren't going to deliver what we want on the ground. Obviously, Hobart has very constrained streets. We don't have the luxury of the grid of Melbourne or Adelaide where you've got those setbacks. So it's a constant measure of trying to achieve a certain development capacity, but considering the amenity at the same time. And so all of these sorts of factors were looked at in terms of considering what sort of tower podium combinations could be delivered on various sites and what sort of impacts that would have on the skyline, and also making sure that at the essence of what we're doing is considering the impacts on those view corridors that are protected under the planning scheme and will continue to be protected. So and just in terms of talking through process, there's obviously been a lot of conversation around the planning scheme amendment process, and it's just a good time just to give you a little bit of an update. So in terms of our local provision schedule, it's been in effect now since August. Yep, and now we are approaching what is called the Gazette, the finalisation of the actual local provision schedule. What happened out of the hearings was they're like, great, yep, we accept this, but you just need to do these modifications. Oh, and these are more substantial modifications that we need you to do as well. Oh, and these might need some advertisement. And we need you to update the maps. And we need you to correct a few things. So it's been quite a few long days trying to make sure that the actual local provision schedule is complete. So in the next few weeks, we should see the final gazetting of the planning scheme, and then it will be then up on the TPC's website because it's currently not there. So it's a little bit of a transition that we've been in. Now, there was minor modifications, which we've gotten done in the last few weeks, but then there's these substantial modifications. So these were, because the process took so long, because we were in hearings for so long, modifications were tabled and raised, and we've landed on quite considerable modifications to Central Hobart that are, in line with the Central Hobart plan. But that substantial modification was deemed too much for them to process as part of the LPS project, so that's what we're hoping to lodge in the next few weeks. It's drafted, it's already there, it's been accepted, but it needs to then be advertised to a small amount of owners that are affected, and then it will go through the TPC process, and then that will be accepted, hopefully. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question on the timeline?
Yeah.
So once we get into this substantial modification process, the TPC has a statutory timeline they have to meet, don't they? Don't they?
Yeah. They've 90 days. Yeah. In terms of processing it.
Yeah, for the logic, so we have to, it'll come back to council, so they're reporting on any reps we receive.
Yes.
Come back to council, a bit like the LPS, but small version.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
then 90 days when they receive.
But it's a bit more disciplined than the LPS process, which seemed to just go on for years, and that was largely because we were in line with many others, weren't we? But there's a statutory requirement for them to.
The process, it's just the content, the sheer volume of the content, I think, previously, but it's a similar process, but the mini version of it, and we're likely not to have that many representations of things.
Yeah.
It's sort of a tick box exercise, but a little bit more than that. And we've been on a journey with them, to be fair. It's been quite interesting learning how to navigate through this process. So Yeah, so that's where we're sitting. That's our main focus for the next few weeks in terms of all the things we're doing. That is a key focus, but it is drafted, and everyone's happy with it. It's literally just now a step-by-step process to finalise that modification. Now, that modification has within it a range of updates which we can send you. It's on the website that reflect the Central Hobart Plan. However, what we are moving into is the finalisation of a proposed particular purpose zone for the actual Central Hobart area, which is much bigger in its aspirations. It will be the Central Hobart Zone, but it's really the capital city zone. That's what it's going to be. Reflect all of the work completed under the built form frameworks. It's going to have higher building heights. It's got lots of interesting aspects to it, including the civic amenities policies and contributions. So it is substantial. It's a lot more than just the substantial modification that's being processed at the moment. And it's along the lines of all the things that we've been talking about over the last few months around trying to get the Central Hobart Plan adopted in terms of getting it into the planning scheme. So we've been spending weeks reviewing the Central Hobart Plan, what the aspirations of the building controls were, what work was undertaken through the Hoddle & Co analysis, what Savills has then reported back on that, and then preparing the draft PPZ. So we're hoping to bring that back to you in early January, along with a policy around civic amenities. And that's a development contribution policy where we'd be looking at if you're over a certain height or you're outside the building envelope, then we would like you to pay this contribution. If you're delivering affordable housing, we wouldn't be asking of that contribution. So
Jen,
that's it in a nutshell.
If everything goes through as planned with that one, so we'll see it in January.
Hopefully.
Hopefully see it in January, Christmas permitting. What's the sort of rough guideline time to actually see it fully in song?
Yeah, so it will be hopefully if it's endorsed in January, then there's a process that kicks off that we need to then get it to the TPC within a month. Then it has to be exhibited. And then there's potential hearings, and then we're at the mercy of the TPC. And it's hard to give you timelines, but it's a few months to a year depending on. Yeah, and once any of this is in the hands of the TPC, we can make that very clear and ask them for timelines. But they're a very small team with a big task, and the state government has underfunded the TPC, I think, for a number of years. Hence why it's been taking so long to get things through. But I think it's important to, draw that line between us doing work or us waiting on them, and making sure that that's clear to the elected members around that processing time.
Just ask, on the TPC, do you know whether they've got recruitment freezes? Like if someone leaves, do they replace them?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure around that particular state agency, but it is a small team. And they've told us to be patient in terms of our lodgements of, because as you'll see in the slides to come, we have a whole tranche of planning scheme amendments that we've been holding back on, waiting for the adoption of the LPS. So yeah, we've got a few coming up. Yeah.
Very good.
So then, as I've said there, TPC review, I haven't put a timeline, but as each one is delivered and in their hands, we'll be able to get updates, hopefully. All right. This is just a quick slide on Priority Action 3.2. We've got our Hobart Design Guidelines now endorsed, and we're moving into implementation, which is exciting. And our Heritage Design Guidelines are almost complete as well. So that's just a quick note on those two projects. I won't go into any more detail on that for now. As I've sort of mentioned, with the transport team sort of being at where they are in terms of their maturity, in terms of getting that strategy endorsed, we believe these projects are in good hands now, and we'll just continue working with them as we do for across implementation. So I'm on the steering committee for the transport strategy, etc., etc. So once transforming Collins Street is completed, then they'll also be looking at further streets for that project. So the one that is least developed is our Priority Action 5 around infrastructure investment, but that's not to say that we haven't been working particularly hard on various aspects of this. As you know, we've tried a few times now for stormwater grants around the infrastructure, but what we have been doing also in the meantime is developing that civic amenities contribution policy, which will go into the planning scheme amendment for the new particular purpose zone for the city, for the Central Hobart. And that's not to be confused with any future public infrastructure and development contributions. There are separate things. So one is around the civic amenity, is around those open space, those softer things that we would like to see in terms of street upgrades. But that public infrastructure around stormwater infrastructure, telecommunications, any of those sorts of major upgrades, that's a separate thing. And we wanted to make sure that we were working closely with the other networks as we're looking to develop our infrastructure approaches across council. So that's stuff that we will be working on into the new year as well. So this is just to give you a quick little timeline. I don't have a mouse, but that's okay. So the way we've colour-coded this is that you've sort of got the planning stage in the light grey, then the implementation stage. And implementation for a lot of these projects will either be ongoing or has quite a long time frame to consider. So we've got delivery, so Innovation Precinct project, for example. Hopefully by June 2026, we've got that task force work would have wrapped up, and we'll have a clear line of direction for that particular, we should have a clear implementation program coming out of that work by mid next year. The street improvement plans, again, Elizabeth Street Vision Project, we'd hope to have something on paper by June 2026, and then that goes into implementation. And the same for building heights, and we're hoping that by early next year, as you can see there, that we've got the draft planning scheme to council and then over to the TPC. And with the transport strategy, that's now endorsed, so that's all in implementation. And then towards the end of, September 2026, so in a year from now, I'm hoping that our infrastructure approach is more clear and that we've got policies in place for that. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you a very brief update on the related strategic land use planning projects that we're working on. So we've just been talking about Central Hobart Plan, but North Hobart, we are coming back with an implementation strategy. We should be having a workshop on Monday the 17th of November to talk you through where we're at with the implementation. We are looking at the same workshop to provide an update on the Sandy Bay Mount Nelson plan. And as you know, with the Inner North East Neighbourhood Plan, that we've really been focusing very much on the city's response to the Mac Point Stadium and the surrounding precincts, so that work is ongoing until we see the outcome of the legislation and the order towards the end of this year. That work, our focus is on the stadium for now. This is just a timeline, and you've got all the list of planning scheme amendments there that we're sort of looking at the moment. As you can see from the top there, the stadium, we're looking at knowing the outcome of the order by early December, and then it's either going to be go, 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 or then I'm not sure what will happen if the order fails. The corridor project, that is being led by Glenorchy Council, and the timeline for that is unknown at this point in time. For the Strellis, we're expecting the draft Strellis in early December, late November, and there could be planning scheme amendments coming out of that work for the city. We're just not sure yet. we're well and away on the Central Hobart implementation, and we've got our implementation plan for North Hobart coming to you in November, as shown there. We're hoping the neighbourhood plan for Mount Nelson and Sandy Bay, we're hoping to have a draft plan towards mid of next year. We've done a lot of work, but we've been awaiting the outcome of the current legislation before government on the protection of land bill on that one. But we should be providing an update in November on that whole project. We've got the housing action plan as well, which we're hoping to bring in November. Then we've got the substantial modifications process, as I've talked about. Then we've got the SAP for short stay visitor accommodation. So we've got all the consultants signed up, and we're having kick-off meetings regarding the development of the SAP with all of the key stakeholders and parties involved in preparing that particular SAP. And then that will be going to the TPC after we've formulated the SAP and council have reviewed it. Then we've got our proposed particular purpose zone for Central Hobart, and basically all the timelines there for the next few projects, the policy associated with that. Then of course our local historic landscape precinct and scenic protection area. That's really the one project. We are awaiting Aboriginal consultancy outcomes on that particular project that we've now got underway. And then we have started work on planning scheme amendments for North Hobart, so we'll be able to talk to that a little bit at the workshop. And then there is a whole bunch of miscellaneous rezonings that have been triggered through the LPS work that one of the team is also starting work on. So that's our work in a nutshell. I think that covers most of the projects. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Miss Lawley. That's a power of work from you and your team to produce all that. It looks like you've got a second power to come yet. Any comments or questions from elected members? Lord Mayor.
Can we go back to the time frame? Can you tell me what those dots and bars mean in terms of the short stay issue?
Yeah, so the date timeline there, again, that's around us preparing a draft of the specific area plan and having it endorsed by council, because once it's endorsed by council, then it goes to the TPC.
Right.
So it's that important endorsement at council.
Didn't we already endorse it years ago? Like this council did though?
A fully drafted specific area plan?
Well, fully drafted amendment and planning scheme amendment was only because we were told we couldn't put it in.
I'm sure the LPS was it.
I mean, maybe check back all the council decisions, but my understanding is we signed off on.
Well, there'll certainly need to be. Yeah, we can check on that. Yeah.
Very good.
So sorry. You need to, because I thought it was sort of drafted, but has it got to be maybe? Is there more?
Well, certainly
you're learning more as you go.
Yeah, certainly the latest data, and we've sort of also. It's no small feat to get this in, and we'll be one of the only councils in Australia, if not the world, to have a policy on this particular issue. The tipping point in terms of how many residents and how many houses are being converted, that's a major factor, and we've got the most recent data that Professor Phibbs is re-examining to have a look at what's been happening, particularly just in this last year. So we needed to make sure that the information that was provided as our evidence was completely up to date.
Yeah. The actual mechanics of or the design of the amendment is pretty much the same as the one we would have signed off on a couple of years ago.
We'll have to check that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we had advice from Simmons Wolfhagen in the past few months, which said, excuse me, that in order to put our best foot forward, we should also get, in addition to Professor Phibbs, an expert planner and an economist as well. So we've briefed Emma Riley from ERA Consulting and also
for our economists.
Oh,
SGS.
SGS.
Yeah. So that they're hoping to have their evidence done by the end of this year, and we can bring it back to the elected members early next year.
And then that then triggers the same through TPC have got their own timeframe they're meant to
Yes.
follow.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, some comments from me just very quickly. In terms of our roles as political advocates rather than decision makers here, in terms of the goals to get towards these outcomes for planning, but also the actual implementation of more medium density, what we want to see in the innovation precinct, is it helpful for us to be advocating amongst our political colleagues in other houses for enhanced funding to the TPC? You mentioned that is potentially something that's slowing the process down, Jen. And is there any other advocacy that you would recommend that we do outside of this city politically?
We haven't mentioned our housing action plan or the incentives policy yet, but that is something else we've got coming to council in a very short time.
We're having to bring that. I mean, it's subject. We're sort of beavering away on a policy in particular and the draft action plan. And Mike has been having discussions with a number of other service providers. I think in terms of your role, I think, being frank, that this sort of work just does take a lot of time. Yes, Jen's comments are accurate in the sense that the TPC could do with more resources, but I think we also just need to be mindful that they're juggling lots of things. I mean, just for them to deal with all of these things is a lot to put on their plate, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, yes, you could ask for more resources for the TPC, but I guess it's also managing expectations a little bit.
But that would assist the timeline if the TPC could get things through quicker.
I think once we've got the ball rolling, particularly knowing if they can give us expected timelines, particularly as we move into the lodgement of its succession of planning scheme amendments, if they are telling us that it's going to be 12 months and things like that, I think and we can report back to council on that, then it's something that can be discussed at the time. As you can imagine, staff come and go, and projects come and go, as we are all aware what's been happening with Kingborough for their current LPS process. So it's a bit hard to I'd rather get this work done and see where we land, and they will give us expected timeframes, and then we can go from there, I think.
Good.
I think in the very short term, our focus should be on the residential incentives that we're working through at the moment, because there is a lot of appetite from TasWater and the state government equally to ourselves, and I think that stands to actually have a really meaningful impact. So whether we need to, I know we had a conversation on Friday with the state government, and whether we need to push them to move a bit faster, that might be something that needs to happen, but we'll see where we land on that.
Very good. Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, well done. It's this huge area. It's all about strategy, and it's just an incredible body of work that you're doing, and complicated. And I noticed, just to highlight the complications of it, you did touch on nighttime economy there, just in one small part. Like I opened the paper up one week, and you look at that visa nighttime index, and we ranked number 41 in Australian region. Week before, council said we've boosted it from 44%. So I can only imagine your job trying to look at what data you look at there. It's so conflicting and subjective, I guess. So it's just a huge body of work, and it's complicated. And once again, I keep saying, but it's interesting presenting to me, and probably some of the other councillors. It's in its simplest form's great. If we want to reference stuff beyond that, it's good to have that as a background document. But this is just huge amount of work.
The complexities and the nuances of it. Just for example, the LPS, the decision itself is 350 pages. So that just sort of puts it in perspective sometimes. what needs to be unpacked, and we're doing it bit by bit.
Very good. Thank you for your time and your
Thank you.
effort.
Exhausting.
Yeah, but we love it.
So we might move on while our lovely Director and Manager leave the table to responses to questions without notice, of which there's one response there. If we can have somebody to move that, please. Moved by the Lord Mayor. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. And that brings us to questions on notice. Does anyone have any questions? No questions. Excellent. So, if I can put that we move to the closed part of the meeting, can I have somebody move that, please?
If I leave, does that
Councillor
lose quorum?
Gidsos.
All's okay.
Excellent. All those in favour of moving into the closed? Against? Carried unanimously.